All right, let's talk about publishing changes. So obviously, we don't want to rebuild our application images every time we change our code. So we're going to map our project directory, like the backend directory, to the app directory inside our container, exactly like before. This way, any changes we make in this directory are immediately visible inside our container. And of course, we have to do the same with the front-end directory separately. So let's open up our compose file. Here's the definition of our API service. In this definition, we're going to add a new property, volumes. Now we can have one or more volume mappings. So here we need the list or array syntax. Now here we can type a relative path. So starting from the current directory, we go to the backend directory and map this to the app directory inside the container. Now in contrast, earlier, when we started our containers manually, we had to type an absolute path. So there, we had to use this syntax to get the current working directory and map it to the app directory. Remember, with compose files, we don't have to do this. So we can type a relative path here. That's a lot easier. So that's pretty much all we have to do to share our source code with our container. There's just one tiny problem. Let's go ahead and start our application. So Docker compose up, and I'm not going to use the detached option because we're going to encounter an error and I want you to see that immediately. So let's bring up the application. Great, we saw the error. Look, it says nodemon not found. What is this? Well, nodemon is one of the packages that our backend project is dependent on. So back to our project, here in the backend folder, we have this package.json, and if you pay close attention, you can see under dev dependencies or development dependencies, we have a dependency to nodemon or node monitor. Nodemon is a utility that watches all of our files, and anytime it detects a change, it restarts our node server. Now, this error is saying that nodemon cannot be found. Can you tell why? Here's the reason. In the backend folder, we don't have the node modules folder, right? Because we haven't installed npm dependencies on this machine. These dependencies were only installed inside the Docker container. But now that we're sharing our application's code with our container, what the container sees is essentially this directory. And here we don't have the node modules folder. So back to the terminal, let's stop this by pressing Ctrl and C. First, we go to the backend directory and run npm install. We can also type npm I. That's a shortcut. All right, all our dependencies are installed. So let's bring up the app one more time. All right, over here you can see nodemon is starting our node process. So let's go to our browser and head over to localhost port 3001/API. This is like the home page of our API. So our API is running. Now let's make a small change in our code and see if that change is visible here or not. So back to our project, here in the backend folder, let's go to route and then index.js. This is where we can change that message. So API is running. I'm going to add a few exclamation marks, save the changes. Now in the terminal, you can see nodemon detected our change and restarted our web server. So back to the browser, refresh, we can see the changes. Beautiful. Now we can apply the same technique to our front-end project. The steps are repetitive, so I leave it up to you as an exercise.